My wife cheated on me with her boss, and afterwards suggested we try an open relationship, claiming it would help save our marriage. I hesitated but agreed, hoping to keep our family together. Everything changed when I genuinely fell in love with another woman. That's when my wife suddenly changed her mind and wanted things to go back to how they were. But by then, it was too late. I stood by the window, watching as Danielle once again didn't come home for the night. First time in 9 years of marriage, her phone was off, no messages, nothing. And the cruelest part? I knew I had no right to be angry, because this was our agreement. More accurately, her idea, and I, like a fool, said yes. The first time she said the words open marriage, I thought I misheard. But it wasn't a joke. She sat across from me with a glass of wine, speaking as if we were discussing grocery shopping. Like we're still young, life is short, and she feels like we've missed out. I remember freezing in that moment. She was my first, my only. I was hers too. I used to think that's where our magic was, but clearly that magic only existed in my head. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just asked, "Is this because of him?" She hesitated, took a sip, shook her head, said it wasn't about a particular person, just this feeling she had, that life was slipping by, that everyone else was exploring and she wasn't. Her eyes were empty as she spoke, and I agreed. Out of fear, out of helplessness, out of the quiet panic that if I didn't bend, I'd lose her completely. We set rules. The most important one, no one comes into our home. I repeated it 3 times. She nodded. Back then, I thought that if we wrote it all down, we'd stay in control. I was wrong. A few weeks in, she started coming home late, and she didn't hide it, wore that awkward smile, part embarrassed, part pleased. I tried not to ask questions, pretended I didn't care, but inside I was dying. For the first time, I felt like I didn't know the woman I'd shared my life with for so long. I tried to be strong, went on dates friends had set me up with, sat across from women and tried to feel something, politely listened to their stories, laughed when expected, gave compliments. But I felt hollow. Then one night, I ducked into a bookstore to kill time, anything to avoid going back to an empty house. On the way out, I saw a man yelling at a young woman near the parking lot. He grabbed her wrist, she pulled back. He lunged again. I didn't think. I stepped in, stood between them. He muttered something, but let go and left. Her name was Una. She apologized, said he was a former co-worker who couldn't take no for an answer, thanked me and insisted on buying me coffee. We went to a small cafe on the corner. She told me she'd moved to the US a couple of years ago, worked in packaging design. I told her I was in IT. We laughed a lot. I don't think I'd laughed like that since before I got married. I came home later than usual. Danielle wasn't there. There was a note on the counter. Staying at Lena's. Only Lena had moved to Texas 2 weeks ago. I knew that. We'd toasted to her new job. I sat on the couch, looked at the note, and realized this was the end. I was still pretending it was the beginning. I put the note back on the table and just sat next to it. There was no anger, no pain, just a heaviness in my chest, like I was slowly sinking underwater. I knew Lena had moved away. I knew Danielle was lying. And yet, I just sat in the dark, hoping maybe if I stayed still long enough, it would all turn out to be a mistake, an illusion. Over an hour passed before I stood up. No yelling, no confrontation, just acceptance. She was living her own life now, and I wasn't part of it anymore. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, wondering, where did we go wrong? When did I stop speaking up? When did she stop seeing me as her man? The next morning, I made breakfast, out of habit. I still tried to keep the rituals alive, like somehow they would hold us together, like an omelet and a cup of coffee could patch up the cracks that had been growing for years. But she didn't come. Not for breakfast, not for lunch. When Danielle finally got home that evening, she was glowing, sun-kissed in a new shirt, laughing about how she just went upstate with the girls. I nodded, pretending to believe her, but something inside had already snapped. I didn't ask who she was really with. I didn't need proof. Sometimes the body understands before the brain catches up. The days that followed, we barely spoke. I left early for work, came home late. She'd show up tired, binge shows, fall asleep on the couch. We were ghosts under the same roof. I once dreamed of a home filled with laughter and the smell of fresh pastries. Now every morning started in silence and ended with an empty stare across the table. I tried to cope. Read articles about marriage ruts, listened to podcasts, even signed up for a free online counseling session. But it all felt hollow. No advice seemed useful when you've officially allowed your wife to sleep with someone else. The irony was that I didn't feel betrayed. I felt abandoned with permission. So I started walking more. Long walks after work, just to avoid coming home. One night I wandered into a bookstore. That place always gave me a sense of peace. I was browsing an old edition of a favorite novel when I heard raised voices near the door. A man speaking sharply, a woman trying to explain something. I turned and saw in the window how he grabbed her arm. I stepped outside without thinking, placed myself between them. The guy muttered something and left. The woman looked shaken, but she smiled and thanked me. Her name was Yuna. She said she was fine, that it was just a pushy ex-coworker. I nodded, ready to leave, but she suddenly offered, "Maybe, let me buy you a coffee." As a thank you, we walked into a little cafe. I expected the conversation to be polite, surface level, but it wasn't. Yuna was surprisingly easy to talk to. She didn't interrupt, didn't complain, just asked thoughtful questions, and I found myself wanting to answer. I told her about books, my job, even childhood memories. We laughed. I felt warm. When I got home, Danielle was already there, watching a show on her laptop. She looked up and asked, "Where were you?" I said, "Went for a walk." She didn't say anything else. I walked into the bedroom, lay on the bed, and realized that, for the first time in a long while, I felt light. Not because the marriage was fixed, not because I was saved, but because someone actually listened. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. For the first time in a long while, not because of anxiety, but simply because I'd slept well. I was alone in bed. Danielle, as always, had fallen asleep on the couch. I stood in the doorway and looked at her, familiar face, quiet breathing, and yet a stranger. We lived in the same house, shared the same meals, but there hadn't been an us in a long time. I left for work early, tried to stay busy, but my thoughts kept circling back to Yuna. How easy it was to talk to her, how she listened without judging. I remembered how she tucked her hair behind her ear when she laughed, the way she looked directly into my eyes. It felt strange. I was married, and this was supposed to be just an open relationship, but inside it felt different. Too real, too honest. We messaged that same day, light, casual. She sent a photo of a coffee cup with the caption, "Not as tasty without company." I didn't just smile, I genuinely smiled. I replied that I was free that evening, if she didn't mind. She didn't mind. We met again at the same cafe. And again, no awkwardness. I felt like myself. Not a husband expected to be understanding, not a man who's supposed to forgive everything. Just a human, a man. She told me about moving here, the struggles at first, the culture shock, her grandmother's sayings, one of them being that a truly loving person makes space feel warm, not suffocating. I listened and realized I didn't want it to end. Not for sex, not to get revenge on my wife, but because, for the first time in a long time, I felt alive. Not surviving, not clinging to a broken marriage out of obligation, just living. When I got home, Danielle was in the kitchen. My favorite soup was on the stove, freshly baked rolls on the table. I looked at her questioningly. She just shrugged. "Felt like spoiling you." She didn't ask where I'd been, not a single question. But I could feel it, she suspected. In the days that followed, she changed, started coming home earlier, wore makeup again, dressed up, not for the office, but for home. Cooked, cleaned, even asked how my day went. All the things I hadn't received in years suddenly became our new routine. Only now I couldn't enjoy it. I responded to her affection mechanically, caught myself touching her and feeling guilty, not towards her, but towards Yuna, because it was Yuna who had been there when I was crumbling. Yuna who showed me I could still be loved. One evening, Danielle wrapped her arms around me from behind. I flinched. She whispered, "I miss us." I didn't respond. Not out of anger, but because I no longer knew who us even was. And then everything shifted. I stepped out of the shower and saw her standing in the middle of the room, holding my phone, shaking, her lips pressed tight, fingers pale. She didn't say a word. I walked over, took the phone from her hands. It was a new message from Yuna. "Good morning, handsome. Slept in your t-shirt. It smells like you. I already miss you." I said nothing, just turned and walked out of the room. Behind me, silence. No screaming, no fight, just breathing, steady and heavy. Later that night, she lay beside me and stared at the ceiling. I could tell she was trying not to cry, but I didn't touch her, didn't comfort her, because now I knew whatever we had was dead, and I wasn't sure I wanted to bring it back. The next day, I woke up before my alarm, just lay there, eyes open, listening to Danielle boiling water in the kitchen. The house smelled like toast. She was making breakfast again. I could even hear her quietly humming a melody, one she used to sing during our first years of marriage. Back then, it felt sweet. Now it felt foreign, like someone trying to revive a dead body and make it laugh again. We ate in silence. I avoided eye contact. She did her best to pretend everything was fine. Casual talk about the weather, traffic, coffee. I answered on autopilot and left for work. In the elevator, my knees almost gave out. It felt like whatever had been holding me together had finally collapsed. I stayed at the office longer than usual, not because I had to, just because I didn't want to go home. My mind kept drifting back to Yuna, her voice, her eyes, the way she placed her hand on mine, not to comfort me, but simply to be close. I didn't know what the right thing to do was anymore. Honestly, I hadn't known for a long time. That evening, I texted Yuna, a short message. Can we meet? Her reply came almost instantly. I'm free. Want me to pick you up? Half an hour later, we were sitting in her car by the waterfront. She'd brought hot tea in a thermos and warm buns. We sat in silence, watching the water. I told her everything, for the first time, completely, about how Danielle and I met, how it started, how it slowly faded, about the open marriage that turned into a dead end, about the guilt, the confusion. She didn't interrupt, just listened, occasionally nodded. Then she said, I think you're still trying to save her. Not the marriage, her. I didn't respond, because it hit a little too close to home. The next day, we had our first couples therapy session. I didn't know what to expect. I sat in the hallway while Danielle filled out a form. She looked nervous, fidgeted with her sleeve, kept checking her phone. When they called us in, I felt something tighten in my chest. The therapist was calm, mid-40s, neutral tone, no judgment. She listened, then asked each of us to briefly describe what was happening. Danielle spoke first. Her voice shook. She said she'd felt lost, that her friends pushed her to experiment, claiming she was missing out by being with the same person since college, that it started as fun, then became routine, and then she saw how I changed, how the light in my eyes vanished, how I became a shadow, and that's when she got scared. I waited for her to bring up Ryan. She did. Admitted they had a relationship. Emotional at first, then physical. But she insisted it wasn't cheating because it happened after we agreed to open the marriage. I didn't say anything, just nodded. The therapist asked what I felt. I said, nothing. It was the truth. Behind all the pain, jealousy, anger, there was now just emptiness. I didn't know if there was anything left worth saving. That evening back home, Danielle hugged me out of nowhere, said, I know I broke us, but I want to fix it. Just tell me you're still here. I didn't respond because I didn't know. All I knew in that moment was how much I wanted to leave, to disappear. I texted Yuna, I don't know what to do, but when I'm with you, I feel alive. That's the truth. After our first therapy session, I disappeared for a few days. I stopped rushing home, came back late, kept quiet, went to bed exhausted, and woke up with the same question looping in my head. Is there still something worth saving? Danielle moved around the apartment like a ghost. She made breakfast, cleaned the kitchen, asked if I was comfortable in that shirt, did all the things she never used to do. Maybe years ago that would have melted me, but now I looked at her like someone holding the shattered pieces of a cup, whispering, we can glue it back together. I felt physically sick. My chest tightened every time she touched me. I felt guilty. For Yuna, for myself, for becoming someone I never meant to be, but most of all, for no longer seeing Danielle as my wife. I told her I needed space, that I was going to stay elsewhere to clear my head. She said nothing at first, then quietly asked if it was because of that girl. I didn't give her a direct answer, but I guess my silence did. My brother let me rent his studio apartment just north of the city. He offered it for free, but I insisted on paying. I needed to feel like this was my decision, not a favor. When I packed, Danielle didn't say much. She handed me the jacket I'd worn when I proposed to her. For the first time in days, I saw her cry, not performative tears, but real ones. I didn't know what to say. I just walked out. The new place was quiet, really quiet, but it wasn't the cold kind of silence. For the first time in a long while, I felt like a person who had a choice. I played music, read books, took long walks. Sometimes I texted Yuna, sometimes I didn't. For once, I didn't feel the urge to escape my own space. Danielle kept messaging me. Short texts. Did you eat? Are you sleeping okay? I got your favorite roles. I replied occasionally, always carefully. I didn't want to be cruel, but I also didn't want to keep feeding the illusion that we were heading back to how things were. One evening, Yuna asked if I wanted to meet. Not pushy, just, I'll be in your area if you feel like a walk. We strolled through the park in the evening light. She didn't ask questions, didn't push, just said she was there if I wanted to talk. I looked at her and felt peace, the kind of peace I hadn't known at home for a very long time. When I returned to the apartment, I found a bag at the door. Inside was one of my old shirts, neatly folded, and a letter, written in Danielle's handwriting. She asked for another chance, said she wanted to prove she could be different, admitted to her pride, stubbornness, blindness. But I couldn't finish reading it. I left it on the nightstand and went to bed. In the morning, I woke up early, sat with my coffee staring out the window, and realized I no longer felt obligated to save our marriage. Not because I was angry, but because I was empty. The part of me that used to fight for us was simply gone. I didn't feel joy, didn't feel victorious, but strangely enough, for the first time in years, I didn't feel pain either. Danielle disappeared from my radar for a few days. No texts, no calls, And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel panic. On the contrary, I felt a quiet, calm acceptance. If she wasn't fighting anymore, then maybe I didn't have to keep dragging the corpse of our marriage behind me. I went to work, saw Yuna now and then, and slept better than I had in years. We weren't rushing anything. She didn't pressure me or demand answers. She was just there. That alone was enough to help me start trusting the world again. But the silence didn't last long. Sunday morning, I went for a run. Same route through the wooded trail. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Turned around. It was Danielle. In athletic gear, tired eyes, but a determined look. She ran beside me without a word, and we didn't speak all the way to my brother's place. At the doorstep, she stopped. "I couldn't stay home," she said. I nodded, was about to go in when she blurted out, "I realize I lost you when I saw your eyes. There was no pain left in them, only silence." I didn't reply, because it was true, and because there was nothing left to explain. But she didn't stop. She started speaking fast, barely catching her breath, about how she started feeling jealous, about Yuna, about how every time I left the room smiling, something broke inside her, that she couldn't take it anymore, and read our messages. And she knew. It wasn't just a fling. "What does she have that I don't?" she suddenly snapped. "What is it she gives you that I couldn't?" I exhaled and said, "She didn't break me. She found me already broken, and she didn't run." Those words hit her like a physical blow. She sat down on the step, cried, quietly, without drama. I stood there unsure if I should stay or leave. In the end, I walked away. For the first time, not out of guilt, but with complete certainty that it was the right thing to do. That evening, I called the therapist and said I was ending couples counseling. I wanted to focus on individual therapy. She agreed and said it sounded like a healthy decision. The next day, Danielle left me another letter. No blame, no begging. Just her telling me she'd quit her job, cut off contact with the friends who'd planted the open marriage idea. She said she realized how easily she'd been led, not into love, but into illusion, that Ryan hadn't been worth even a tenth of what we had built, and that she finally understood that. I read it all the way through, but for the first time I felt nothing. No anger, no relief, not even sadness. Just a fact. We were over. That evening I met up with Yuna. We sat on a bench by the water sipping hot tea from her thermos. I was quiet for a long time, then finally said, "I'm scared, not of losing you, of losing myself again, but I think I'm ready to stop hiding." She didn't say anything, just took my hand, and I felt more truth in that gesture than in 1,000 words. I thought that was it, that Danielle and I had finally let go of each other, wordlessly but completely. But as it turned out, the story still had one last unpleasant twist. A week after I stopped therapy, I got a call from one of Danielle's former coworkers, Amelia. We were never close, but we'd met at a few company events. Her voice was tight, uneasy. She asked if we could meet. I was surprised, but agreed. She said it was about Ryan. When we met, I barely recognized her. Exhausted face, tear-streaked eyes, hollow gaze. She started talking without much buildup. She'd had a brief fling with Ryan after Danielle left the company. She assumed there was nothing left between him and Danielle, but then she suspected she was pregnant and told him. Ryan snapped, called her names, accused her of trying to trap him, said he never planned to leave his fiancée and that she was just a distraction. Amelia was stunned. Her boyfriend found out through their texts and left her. A few days later, she had a miscarriage. She said she shared everything with Danielle, not for sympathy, but as a warning. And according to her, that's when Danielle woke up. The two of them gathered all the messages, screenshots, and details and turned it over to HR. Ryan was officially fired from the company. Amelia didn't come to me for comfort. She said she wanted to take responsibility for being part of the environment that helped destroy someone else's marriage. Her apology was honest. No dramatics. And for the first time in a long while, I felt a trace of respect for someone owning up to their part in a mess. I thanked her, but told her, for me, that chapter was closed. Later that day, I stopped by the old house to grab a few things. Photo albums, some books, a box of old notebooks. I didn't expect to stay long, but when I opened the door, Danielle was there. Sitting in the living room, our wedding photos spread out on the coffee table. Her eyes were red. She didn't yell, didn't beg, just sat quietly. I gathered my things quickly, trying not to linger. But before I could leave, she said, "I want to show you something." It was a text from Ryan, full of rage. He accused her of ruining his career, said she was never worth his attention, and told her to go screw that pathetic husband of hers. I read it, nodded, and said, "You did the right thing, but it doesn't change anything between us." Danielle nodded silently. I was already at the door when I heard her voice, cracked, tearful. "I know it's too late, but I don't think I just lost my husband. I think I lost a friend, and myself." I didn't say anything, just walked out. This time I didn't feel relief. But there was no pain either, just silence. The same silence that used to scare me, now felt like home. It's been a little over a month since I last set foot in what used to be our home. No calls, no letters, no pleas to make things right. Danielle vanished from my life the same way she'd been in it for the past few years, quietly, almost invisibly. And this time, I didn't try to stop her. Life didn't suddenly become brighter or easier, but it became real. I no longer lived in tension, no longer dissected every message for hidden meaning. I wasn't waiting for the next letdown. I was just learning how to live again, not as someone's husband, not as the guy who got betrayed, but as a person who had finally woken up from a long, exhausting sleep. I went to therapy once a week. At first, I couldn't speak. Then I started. I talked about the lack of warmth, about the silence that grew louder than shouting, about how I spent years next to someone who looked right through me, and about how slowly I became transparent myself. Una never left. She stayed nearby, but never filled the space with noise. Never pushed, never asked, "So, what are we now?" She just showed up, with coffee, with calm, and that, more than anything, was what I needed. We didn't rush to label it. For the first time in my life, I wasn't clinging to a new relationship just to escape an old one. I was learning to simply be. One evening, we sat on the balcony. She was reading, I was scribbling in a notebook. It was quiet, soft, and suddenly I noticed I was breathing. Not surviving, breathing, not waiting for apologies, not searching for meaning, just existing. And it was enough. Danielle sent one last message 2 weeks ago. No blame, no manipulation, just, "I'm grateful for everything we had, and even more for how much you endured. I hope you're happy. You deserve to be." I didn't respond, not out of resentment, but because nothing needed to be said. Her words didn't hurt. They didn't move me. They simply were, like the period at the end of a sentence that should have ended long ago. Last Sunday, I drove to the lake we used to visit in the early years of our marriage. This time alone. I brought a coffee, my old film camera, took a few pictures, just for myself. No symbolism, no deeper meaning, just a reminder. I exist. I'm alive. And when I came back to my small apartment, turned on the lights, and saw Una asleep on the couch wrapped in my sweater, I realized I didn't want anything more. Not closure, not grand emotions, not redemption arcs, just silence. This new, healthy kind of silence. The one that holds no fear. The kind of silence where I'm no longer waiting to be broken, because I'm not a victim anymore. I'm not the leftover from a broken marriage, not the man she cheated on. I'm just me. And for the first time in a long time, I'm not rescuing shattered pieces. I'm building something new. And this time, on solid ground.